There we go.
All right. Hello,
Yeah,
everyone. Welcome back to Little Mistakes in Your podcast. I'm Mary, and
I'm JC.
my lovely co-host is JC. And today we're going to be discussing the familiar backgrounds of the Black female characters of Degrassi and wanted what we wanted to see more of, our ideas for how we could have delved more into that. Since this was JC's idea, would you like to start off first?
Yep, of course. All right. So basically, I really thought that, it kind of came, the idea of it came from, us talking about Liberty and how, maybe what kind of storyline we will, like, our last episode kind of storylines that, she would have, we could have gotten from her. And I think, it would be good to explore, kind of like all of, the Black female characters and how, their storylines really, how, they could have really show more of their family life and whatnot. Like I figured we go in we go in kind of chronological order from Liberty ending all the way with Shay and whatnot. So yeah. I guess we'll start off with Liberty. So we already talked a little bit about this. Or a little bit about this last episode. But Liberty, she had the probably had the most visible home life of all the Black female characters, with our only competition being Shay. And Liberty is I feel Liberty is slightly above Shay when it comes to seeing her family, simply because she had Liberty has an actual brother that was a main character on Degrassi. And and unlike a certain cousin duo that we'll get to later, we actually very much remember the fact that that she has a brother and whatnot. So yeah. I'd say I guess I'll just ask you, Mari. What do you have any specific I know we already talked about this last week, but do you have any specific ideas of what you would have liked to see from Liberty's home life?
I just wish we saw more of it before season 4, before Jeopardy, before it became basically a Jeopardy plot device, because with Liberty's character, we see with her flaws, with her being her perfectionism and her sometimes judgmental attitude. But if it's when we see her family, we can see why. Her family's very strict and harsh, and they just seem like they just give off a very perfectionist, upper class Black family, like Jimmy's parents were. And we could have had more storylines, especially we could have delved into the ableism in the Black community, because Liberty has dyscalculia, even though it was only mentioned in one episode. It obviously it could open up the storylines with her feeling, with her family feeling feeling ashamed that she even has a disorder, a learning disability, and putting pressure on her to overcome that, because of how the Black community, when it comes to mental disabilities, we just have this attitude of to just pray, we can pray it away to God, or that tough love, and to force tough love to that having tough love will cure a person's disability, and just hide it away from the rest of the family. And I can see Liberty's parents being too dismissive to educate themselves. And Liberty's also a character that I feel is very heavily autistic coded, so that's another can of worms.
Yeah, of course, of course. I completely agree with all of that. Couldn't have said it better myself. I think really, especially like you said, just especially like you said, the discount, the Black community having this stigma against kind of mental disabilities is a very important. It would have been lovely for the Degrassi to go over and whatnot. Especially maybe there could have been a dynamic of her teacher, I know with that whole, we tackled the whole episode, the whole rumors episode last week. where like maybe like and I'll maybe like a follow-up plot, or maybe a plot that can happen like before this, or maybe instead of this plot, is like maybe like Coach Armstrong, of course, being a black man, he's the one who like really like who finds out that Liberty is has dyscalculia, and like he's the one who tries to like he's the one who tries to like maybe like convince her parents, saying, hey, your daughter, yeah, she's smart as hell, but she still needs the help, like for her, disability and whatnot. Her parents are just like, no. Because I saw like, if for any of you guys who watch Abbott Elementary out there, there's an episode just like this where like you had like where you had like a black girl and like her parent, and like where she basically had like a reading disability, dyslexia, I believe. And like when her parents came in for like a little like conference with with like one of the teachers, like they're like, oh no, like there's nothing wrong with her and all that stuff. Because I think like with like the black community, it's just like you see when you tell like when someone tells you like, hey, your kid may be autistic, they may have this disability and whatnot, they say, oh, there's nothing wrong with them, why are you saying that there's something wrong with them? And it's just like they're like, you're right, there's nothing wrong with them, but they still need that help. And I think that would have been perfect for Liberty, considering the fact that like considering the fact that she is like like you said, she's a perfectionist and whatnot.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, like I can just see her parents treating it like as the greatest shame, that, and just expect Liberty to just power through it. And because they have to be a credit to their race, they kind of thing.
Of course, of course.
And yeah, like, and my thing is like we could have seen her family also, like after the pregnancy plot and her having to give her baby up for adoption, seeing her parents like have some development and being less strict on her, especially after JT was murdered, that they could have like opened themselves up into supporting her better, where she didn't have to feel that she was alone during this pregnancy. And we could have had them acknowledging that JT was as flawed as he could be. He tried, and that he was at heart a good person, and that he did love Liberty, and like maybe get her mother, like encouraging her find love again. Like we could have had something more, like we could have had like a character development like Audra Torres or the Bandaris. And
Yes,
we also could have seen them be or address like the whole like, we could have seen like Danny's side of it, where Danny feels, where we could see make explicit on the show that Danny feels that Liberty's the golden child, and he's seen as the unambitious child. Because with Danny we see that he was way more relaxed and easygoing and charming more than Liberty was.
exactly.
And and maybe we should have seen more of that. We could have seen more of that. Like we could have seen their sibling dynamic be giving more depth. But even then, like Liberty and Danny is one of my favorite sibling dynamics on the show. I actually think they're very underrated because people don't talk about Danny much, and a lot of people hate Liberty.
Exactly. Like, like Danny saying, like, Danny, like, I honestly love Toby. Danny saying, does Danny have to choke a dude, is iconic. But I also, like, I think, like, when you brought up the pregnancy, I really thought about it. I think how interesting it is how, like, they seemed like really, like Liberty's parents more so seemed more angry at the fact that it's JT, rather than like her daughter, like rather than like their daughter being like pregnant. And like while when like and while watching that scene, you can see like because they offer and say, okay, we'll just take care of everything and whatnot. And it seems like their issue was really with like JT. I think that's very interesting, to see that like to see that they still like have like, even though like they might not have been like the most like reasonable with everything, to see that they still have like their daughter's like best interests at heart, with like and trying to still like support her with everything.
Yeah, and like I mean, I mean, I don't blame them too much for being uncomfortable with like JT because I mean we know about JT.
Yeah,
Why I mean JT, as much as he was good, he before season the whole pregnancy plot, he was very immature and it's just like I'm like maybe there's because I know if the like often with and like this really doesn't get delved the complexity with like interracial relationship on Degrassi didn't really get delved into, but perhaps they thought that JT was just perhaps did just saw Liberty as like this just this from a fetishy standpoint.
yeah, exactly. And I think it's like, it kind of would be like, interesting just to like really see, like, because I don't think we ever really like, find out if like, because like obviously we know we like, very much see even before Liberty's pregnancy that Liberty's parents, specifically her father, is not they're like he's not a fan of JT. And I think like it would have been interesting to really like see like, maybe this comes from like her like like maybe Liberty told like told her parents about like the way JT treats her. I think it would have been interesting to see if Liberty told JT about not JT told her parents about the way JT treating her, and she doesn't necessarily see that there's anything wrong, and then her parents are like, no, that's not nice, that's not cool, the way he treated you was not cool whatsoever.
Absolutely. Like I because they probably saw it as like they probably saw it as this boy was only interested in their daughter for like sexual purposes or that he wouldn't respect the fact that she's a smart capable black girl on their own. Like they probably did not they probably disliked him because of that. Like they were like it was partially out of concern for how he ultimately would have done their daughter.
Exactly. Exactly. And I have it right here. I have like a little note right here, kind of switching like, topics within the topic of Liberty's parent. And it'd be very interesting to see, considering the fact that her parents are successful, to see like, maybe like, Liberty's parents be like have a flaw of being kind of like pro-capitalist or even hold like some conservative ideals because like, something that's like really not talked about in the black community is how like a lot of black people, especially like black adults and whatnot, are very pro-capitalist and like just hold these conservative ideals, and they just like think like they don't realize it because like they're obviously not like racist towards black people and whatnot, well at least most of the time. That's a whole nother can of worms. But like, it's like obviously like a lot of like black people, they like, they don't see as being conservative because like the reason they're against conservative is because of racism. And they don't see like how they may have some like conservative ideals, like for example, like a lot of like the whole the grind, like this grind culture within the black community is very pro-capitalist. And seeing how Liberty's parents are very successful, I think it would have been interesting to see maybe they just like, are these like kind of like pro-capitalist, like, type of people who never really bother to question that, like, maybe that, hey, maybe spending every single minute of your life working isn't such a good thing. And especially considering like, them being like, because odds are like, let's say like Liberty was born in like the late 80s without the retcon. So I'm assuming her parents may have been born in like, the early 60s, maybe even the 50s, if I had to take a guess. And so it would be interesting to see like how they really has like work hard, work their way up to where they are. So they just kind of like put that pressure on their children because of like because ideally they probably grew up in the 60s.
Very, very good points. Like, you actually did spur my mind to think of something good because with with it's this is another reason why the whole the Tower relationship was was such a disaster and like really such a goofy plot line because reasonably okay, so Liberty's parents were did very obviously hated JT and probably thought that he was just some obnoxious white kid that wasn't good enough for that was going to look down at her daughter. But Towers was literally a black kid in a bootleg gang, like a little kitty gang at school, who dressed and talked like a street thug. So like it's very like there's no way they would have proved that relationship, and we should have seen a reaction to that on screen. Could have made for a really interesting plot line, like same way of how like Shay was worried that her parents would hate Tiny because of his past of being having a gangbanger older brother. We most definitely like should saw that be elaborated with Liberty and Towers too. Her dad probably would have gotten him arrested
Exactly, exactly, exactly. Like, plus I would.
because because those type of black people like the bougie upper class like overly ambitious, they look down, they're very classes and they look down on black people from the hood despite appropriating their aesthetics sometimes.
Exactly. Like kind of like going to like, kind of getting ahead of myself. Like I'm gonna like go into later how like I relate to like the idea of like growing up in like kind of like a home where just like, growing up in like a home where like I felt like, where I felt kind of like privileged in a way, quote unquote. Like, similar to to how like, Shay is and like ideally how like Liberty was, but like, we'll get to that when once we get to Shay. But other than that, do you have anything else you want to say on Liberty's home life?
Just to repeat that, we should have seen that we they did it could have really pushed for an arc of of ableism in the black community and the innate pressures that black people that a lot of black families put on their children to be perfect to combat old racial stereotypes, basically.
Of course, of course, of course. I think that would have been like, just very interesting for Liberty's parents to learn, especially seeing how like ideally they like, because a lot of like black people who like hold like these like ableist beliefs, these like, pretty much kind of conservative beliefs, these pro-capitalist beliefs, is that like they don't realize that like that this kind of all stems from one thing being racism. And so like I think that would have been a very good arc for like her parents to like kind of like unlearn that. But our next one is Hazel. And in my opinion, I made sure I watched Don't Believe the Hype right before this so I can get everything. I think Hazel, out of all the characters we're talking about today, has the biggest like the biggest wasted potential when it comes to her family life.
Absolutely. Like, Don't Believe the Hype is one of my favorite episodes, like, because of what conversations it brought about Hazel. Like, it's one of the few episodes like that and Take On Me that like give her some depth. Like we like it's for me as a black person, what makes me annoyed about the way people react to the storyline is that Hazel having internalized hate towards herself makes perfect sense. Like she's the daughter of Somalian refugees and she was hate crimed and bullied for being Muslim, and could that combine with being African because because of not only the racism of the racist perception of Africans from non-black people, but our own internalized racism towards Africans from other parts of the diaspora. And we should have seen Hazel navigating that background, like having, like we could have seen, like because we should have actually seen her parents on screen for starters. We like Hazel's another character where I can totally see her having her parents also being strict and having very high perfection standards for their daughter because they're trying to combat against they feel like they have something to prove and a society that's both anti-black and Islamophobic.
Exactly. Is
And
that, oops,
we
sorry.
well, no, it's fine. I was also going to add, like, it could have added more into her relationship dynamic with Jimmy, with how, like, navigating and not like, well, not while they're that while they were a black couple, that we could have seen us them had navigating that whole interfaith issue as a couple with perhaps like because I mean because Hazel was a sweetheart and she had a lot going for herself and like she seemed to have such a likable personality that I don't believe Jimmy's parents would have any reason to dislike her. Like they'll see her as respectable. However, maybe Jimmy's parents. Well, actually, no. Jimmy's parents. I can totally see Hazel's parents liking Jimmy
Yeah, I think
because
like
as I forgot to bring up during a Liberty thing, like if Liberty dated Jimmy, like her parents were, I think Jimmy is a type of would be the type of black guy that her parents would support her dating that and Damien. Bleh. But Hazel's parents would also, I think they'll also approve of Jamie because he was a light skinned son of a lawyer who was very popular and had a lot going for himself.
yeah, exactly. And I think it's like very like, I think it's cool because like something I noticed when I watched Don't Believe the Hype right before this is that like, when it comes to when they're having the whole group discussion about Islamophobia and all that stuff, like, you see Jimmy actually like, like as usual, hold Spinner accountable. But for like, the stuff for something that he said, and he said like, and like he talks about and like you actually see Jimmy speak out in support of like, in support of like, like again like support against Islamophobia because he mentions how his neighbor is named Osama has been Calfro like 3 times just because of his name. So I think like maybe like because something else like that the episode mentioned was that like how Hazel's dad fought in the civil like actually fought in like a civil war and whatnot. And like Hazel's mom came over before like like Hazel and like only came over when she was a baby with her mom, and her dad didn't come till later. And I think like I think it would have been just like very like interesting if this whole like arc kind of like this whole like episode was kind of like a season long arc, honestly. And like I don't want to like I don't want to like get too into it quite yet because like I'm assuming eventually we're going to have like a discussion episode on Hazel and maybe even this episode in general. But I think like it would have been cool to see like because Hazel mentioned she was hate crimed at her previous school, so I want to know like I really want to know like what was like like what did her parents kind of like like think about that, and how did her parents like really like what does her parents think she's doing while she's at school? Because obviously you see Hazel has a bunch of internalized like Islamophobia and whatnot throughout this entire episode, and like this didn't just come out of nowhere. So I'm wondering like how exactly does like because it would have been cool to see in this episode like maybe instead of like maybe instead of like the scene where Hazel went to like the restaurant to pick up like jerk chicken, maybe like we she goes home and we see that like and we see that her parents like she tries to maybe hide her assignment from her parents and whatnot, and maybe we can see like what would their reaction be to like the assignment. Maybe like will they like encourage her to like would they encourage her to like like show her like her Muslim culture and whatnot? Would she like would they like encourage not to? Because like something interesting I like see is that a lot of like a lot of like I feel like older like black people and marginalized people in general, but specifically older black people, is that like they try their best to kind of just like stay out of people's way, just like kind of like not really show themselves out there out of fear of like something bad happening to them. So it would be interesting to see if her parents were like like that, saying maybe let's not show like maybe like you can like maybe they say like oh maybe you can like sit the assignment out or something like that. Maybe like there's the type of people who just like kind of like don't want to show just because they don't want to like get in trouble. They don't want to like really get injured, especially after Hazel's incident at her last school, which I'm probably going to assume maybe that was the reason she's transferred to Degrassi.
Yeah, and I think I wish that Degrassi was better about showing more going more into like other faiths than just Christianity because we could have had several educational episodes on coming Hazel accepting and being proud of her faith and learning how to navigate that with that faith in a westernized country such as Canada.
Exactly.
And it's just really disappointing because like we get a lot of that with the Bandaris to an extent, but even then like their portrayal of Muslim with that family wasn't like super perfect either because a lot of it was viewed through the lens of Sav's white girlfriend Anya. But
Yeah, and like exactly.
and like with Hazel, like because like I personally like I could see her mother being either like I could see her mother either being like a salon like her mother could be a housewife, she could have been like a salon owner, could have run a restaurant because like there's like we also could have like we like because of Hazel's like heritage, like we could have seen more of her interacting. We could have seen some interesting like diaspora issues with her compared to other black characters.
Exactly, exactly. Like I'd be down to see like an episode where I'm not too sure like, I'm not like I don't know if we've had an episode where like maybe like I guess like the closest thing I'm thinking about like an episode where maybe two people are in a relationship and like, two characters are in a relationship and like their parents meet each other's parents. The closest thing I'm thinking about is like, is like Helen meeting Audra in season 14, but that's still like but like I think it would be interesting to see maybe Hazel's parents meeting Jimmy's parents and whatnot.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I think like that will be interesting, especially considering how like we're not planning to go into like Jimmy's parents or anything like that. Like into that, but seeing how like Jimmy's parents are like very like rich, they're very much up there. They're kind of like like if we were talking about Jimmy's parents, like his home life, we probably would talk like it would probably be a lot of the same stuff we had to say about Liberty, but even more so considering that they're just outwardly rich. It will be interesting to see maybe like they have like maybe Jimmy's parents like look down on like Hazel's parents due to the fact that they're refugees and they're Muslim and whatnot. Maybe like like I think that would have been interesting to see like kind of see like how that because you see like a lot of like because unfortunately I see a lot of like I still see like some like Islamophobia. Like I remember back in high school I saw some like a lot of like there's like a black girl who was Muslim come into like a classroom and whatnot. And like, I heard like, trigger warning for Islamophobia. But I heard like, literally another like, black girl in my class literally say that that literally say something like very like Islamophobic and whatnot. And like, I think, seeing that, especially even though the girl was still black, she still got that Islamophobic comment. So I think like, it would be interesting to see like Hazel's family go through that. And another thing is that, like, like I said, her dad fought in the Civil War. I would like to see, like, maybe how does that affect him now as like kind of like a veteran of like that like war and whatnot. Like, what is he doing? Like, what is he doing now? And like, how is that with his like did his like participation in the war affect him now? How does that affect his relationship with Hazel?
yeah, like with me, my just thoughts on this is just it's just a shame, but because it is Islam is a very big part of the Black community across the entire diaspora. Like after Christianity, Islam is our second biggest religion, whether you are believing or not. Like so many of my own family members are Muslim, and it's just it's just a shame that there was such a lack of there was such a lack of interest in portraying that cultural diversity from the writers. But there's always fan fiction. That's
Exactly.
my lasting thoughts on this.
Exactly. It will just I think like honestly just like just kind of like just a storyline where like where Jimmy's family meets Hazel family um because like it was definitely like something that could have happened in like season 4 and 5 with Jimmy being in the hospital alive. I think that's something that could have happened, so it was a very much a missed opportunity. So our next one is Chantay. So I said earlier that Liberty and Danny are the most like known and like most like easily like recognizable like pair of like pair of like black students that are related. um and I mentioned that like a certain like duo of cousins unfortunately isn't like, unfortunately aren't very like, well known, because I feel like I don't blame people if they forget that they're cousins, but we're talking about Chantay specifically, and like her like, home life with Dave. And I think that's where like actually this kind of like topic in general like kind of like came from. When we decided to do this topic, it's just like how very little we got between Chantay and Dave's like, and they dynamic, despite the fact that they were cousins. And like despite the fact that they were cousins, and like, we and like they were both like, at least like Dave was more of a major character, but we barely got any of like, they were on the show for 3 seasons together, and we just like, never really got much about them being cousins. So I think it would have been it would have been very interesting to see kind of like, Shantay's home life, and really see how her dynamic with like her cousin is, and like Dave's family, because my personal headcanon is that Shantay's mom is the sister to Officer Turner.
That's and that's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
Because well, because I'm sure, as you probably gather from Smells Like Teen Spirit, see I personally headcanon that Shantae's mother is the sister of Dave's mother, mostly because well, with a lot of Black families, I'll just say this, it's like a running joke in our community with our mom's side of family versus our dad's side of family. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
But I agree. Like, what we did see is, like, I thought it was kind of it could have been, they were kind of cute. They were a cute dynamic to see, because we obviously have Shantae, the older cousin, who's like slightly annoyed by Dave because, one, he's the younger cousin, and also two, Dave was very attention seeking and self-important, like very arrogant when he first came on his show. And so Shantae is his older cousin who's trying to like humble him and like remind him, like, in that very older cousin teasing way, saying, "Hey, can you like not embarrass me? Because like the reason why you're not going to be popular is because you're annoying and a loser." But she obviously still cares about him though. And
Exactly.
we should have seen more plot lines, because we should have seen more plot lines featuring it too, I because at least with my family, I'm very close with my cousins, and I know a lot of people in Black and Brown cultures are also very close to their cousins, because we tend to have such big families, and just because we're not siblings doesn't mean that they can't be close. Obviously, since they went to the same school.
Exactly. And it's something to say, because I believe like, I guess this is kind of implied to be canon, but Shantae is, I think it's kind of because like, since Shantae was there in season 4, trying
Yes.
trying to like look at like the ages. She's 2 year no, yeah, she's 2 years younger than Manny and Emma in that class, right? So
Well, yeah, she was retconned just once. To
okay.
word to every Degrassi fan out there, she was not retconned like 50 million times. Her age was retconned once.
Okay, yeah. And because I
But
was
she is younger. She like realistically, because with retcons, the class of 2007 should now be the class of 2010 due to retcons. Like Shantae, realistically, the class of 2011 should now be the class of 2012. So
yeah,
Shantae would be at most, yeah, at the least, she would be like maybe a year younger than them, and at the most, she'll be like 2 years younger than them.
yeah. Because I was thinking that it would have been an interesting thing to like, an interesting like, thing to say, that like, because like Shantae, interesting to have it. So Shantae is like, kind of like the last, like, like kind of like the last character we see in like, the in like grade 8. Like I think that would have been interesting. And especially to see, and like, to see like, obviously like, with her, with like that kind of like, kind of head canon or whatever. Like, kind of see like, oh, she's been here much longer than like, much longer than Dave. Like not just because like she's like, not just because like she's like obviously older than him, but like also maybe the fact that like but also maybe the fact that like, if like if like she like was like one of the last classes to like one of the last people to be in like like grade A at the Grassy. I don't know. That was kind of confusing, but I think like like you said, it's very good to see like kind of see like that kind of like dynamic between the two. And I really think like both characters really could have gotten like a lot out of each other and whatnot. Because by the time you get to season 11 and like season 11, season 10, I think season 10 is when Officer Turner started working at the school. Yeah, it was season 10. I don't know why I thought it was because like the whole like Wesley thing. But yeah, season 10 is when Officer Turner started working in school. I would have loved to see maybe like what was Chantay's like like reaction to that, like maybe her like about like her uncle working at the school now, because we only got Dave's, which like I mean like yeah, that's his dad, but like I would love to see like Chantay's as well, because by the time season 11 rolls around, I forget that Chantay and Dave are cousins actually. I don't even know if they even had a single interaction in that season.
Yeah, like and like that's just really messed up because it's just so weird. Like because they're like a gender inverted Arthur and Dorothy from Degrassi High. And it's kind of the same thing where in Degrassi, when Dorothy comes on Degrassi High, Arthur's embarrassed of her and finds her annoying, and we see the same thing with like Shantae and Dave, but like we could have seen because Shantae and Dave interests kind of like their interests are kind of into the same field, like entertainment. Dave obviously wanted to be an actor and had displayed an interest in being a rapper. Meanwhile, Shantae was more of the talk show host, gossipy kind of thing, with us interest in acting as theater as well. Like we could have seen like that with that dynamic. We obviously we had two black characters in the same family who had interest in the same field, and we should have seen and we could have seen them grow to be as they grow as they develop and become more mature people as they become more supportive of each other's interests.
Exactly. Like, kind of would have been cool. Like, kind of cool, like, kind of like would have been some cool like headcanons. Maybe like, maybe like as kids they played like, I don't know, some make believe game where they were like, like celebrities or whatnot. I think that would have been like a pretty cool like that's like a pretty cool headcanon I could think of. But like, I think like, similar but like I think like it would have been pretty cool to also see how Shantae's family deals with the fact that one of them is like that how Shantae's family deals with the fact that like, somebody like, in the family is like, is a black cop and whatnot.
Yeah, there could have been because to not get too far on this subject from a personal standpoint, like I can see totally where members of their family are like very mistrustful of Officer Turner, and how we could have seen how there's another family where we could see the internalized blackness come out because of Officer Turner being up because of having a cop in her family. But yeah, like we could have seen how that affects because Shantae is embarrassed to have like her peers probably see her as a loser, or they where she feels pressure that she has to be perfect or conform because her uncle is a cop, and how that affects her relationship with Dave. Because I mean, what we see with Dave, because like it's like hey, she could have been like, "Cause why are you? You know you can't be doing all this when your dad's a cop. You know that, right?" And like we should see like we should have seen like development, like support and conflict. Like it would have been interesting to play into a conflict of make that a conflict in their relationship where Shantae feels like Dave's side of the family is very like not for the people, and is internally racist and potentially oppressive because his dad's a cop, and that kind of stuff is inevitable.
Exactly. Um, I completely agree. I think like something else I wanted to like well so, like you mentioned like smells like Teen Spirit earlier. I really like what you did with like mentioning more about like Chantay and Dave's family when it comes to like when it came to like your like tackling like of like your kind of like adaptation of Crimea River and whatnot. I think you did a good job with like I didn't know if you wanted to talk about that plot or whatnot. It's okay if you don't, but like I thought you did like a really good job and like kind of like showing like talking about like Shantae and Dave's family and whatnot.
Oh, thank you. Like that's just when I wrote Smells Like Teen Spirit, when I introduced Dave, I knew that's what I wanted to do was to delve more into him and Shantae's home life on with serious plots and like lighthearted plots. Like I knew for years for a whole while I wanted to write a family reunion fic with Dave and Shantae because that's a big thing in my family. Is family reunions
Exactly,
and
exactly,
how they interact as cousins there because we could have seen that big family love on the show
exactly.
and
And I
how mhm.
oh, you go ahead.
I know you're fine.
Okay.
Like
Yeah, like I think like Dave and Shantae would have been like the best black characters like into like the best black characters to like show the like to show like show kind of like a lot of the like other like stuff about black culture like cookouts like I think that would have been really cool to just see like a family cookout behind like family cookout like with Shantae and Dave. It would have been cool to see Shantae's like family kind of be like very like kind of like involved like with like the Grassy as a school in general, like similar to the way like Audra was like how Audra was very involved with the school. I think it would have been cool to see like if anybody's like parents were like involved with the school. Besides like I think like like outside of like Officer Turner, I would love to see like Shantae's parents like maybe seeing them like maybe seeing them like kind of like be like involved with the school, especially considering how we saw like how we saw like the Shantae like one of Shantae's like only plots was like when she tried to I forget what was it, she was protesting something Simpson was doing and whatnot. It was the episode where they had like where she put all the no car where like all the no cars put on his car and whatnot. And it would have been cool to see like her parents maybe get involved in that, maybe see like where she gets that stuff, that type of like energy from.
yeah, she was protesting Simpson because he got rid of the clubs due to the Vegas night disaster.
Yeah, exactly. I think that would have been like really cool to kind of see like maybe like
Yeah, because I can totally see because I mean, you can just look at Shantae and see that she was raised with a strong-minded upbringing because she took charge of her own. And like we yes, probably we can also see we could have also seen her be protective and like strict with Dave she because she feels like because she's such a leader
exactly,
and
exactly.
it would have been good. Like I personally what we did like and it's just kind of sad that he wasn't at her graduation.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I love Van Derner, but it was Shantae's last season. We could have had some plots to them too.
Exactly. Like you literally like forget that. Like matter of fact, I don't think I even knew at first that they were cousins because like I said last episode, I started watching live around season 11 and they didn't have any interactions like in season 11. Maybe we could have seen like more like, maybe we could have seen like, Shantae like kind of like, like you have in like, Smells Like Teen Spirit and whatnot, seen like Shantae really approach Dave about like, the like about his like whole like transphobia in like Crimea River. I think that would have been very interesting.
Yeah, I agree. And like my takeaway is that because my takeaway for Shantae is that with them being cousins, we should have definitely seen we should have seen them be given the same attention as other flying parents on the show. we should have seen them like we should have seen development on Chantay becoming more accepting and more supportive of Dave and and him respecting her more. We could have seen like a plot with them having a conflict where she feels that Dave and his dad, like Dave's a coon because of his daughter's back because of his dad being a cop. Because
Yeah.
I can totally see that, and Dave harboring some internalized anti-blackness. And we also could have seen them. We should have seen them be on a production together,
Exactly. Considering the fact that she was
and
like involved in that play.
Dave writing the Dave being a part of the Grapevine, and her being on a radio show. Like we should have seen more. They're the sibling they're the cousin dynamic. They're the familiar dynamic that has me the most intrigued at times.
Exactly. Like I hate to bring up these two characters, but very unfortunate that I felt like that Tristan and Owen out of all characters got more like, of like screen time together. But like Tristan and Owen's dynamic where like Tristan would go to Owen for advice and like apply. I want that for Dave and Chantay.
Yes,
Like I think like they definitely deserved it more than like those two, the Milligan brothers,
the Miller clowns.
the Miller clowns. But yeah, like I think like would have been also another like cool headcanon is that like since Chante is like also into fashion, maybe we could see like her like like maybe we could see like her like designing like maybe like an outfit for Dave during like a play and whatnot. Like like I can just see like like I guess like we're getting like when coming to headcanons about like this like family familial dynamic. I think maybe we can see maybe like in the future, Shantae and Dave, like, they're like, they're kind of like a 2-in-1 when it comes to like, movie, like, when it comes to like, Dave working on movies and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. We could have seen a very the same way with the we could have seen them been like a very Degrassi bootleg Wayans family.
Exactly, exactly. Like that would have been so cool. That would have been so cool. Now I'm gonna think about that for the rest of the day. Thank you. But do you have any lasting like thoughts on Shantae?
That was my lasting thought.
Okay. All right. We shall move on to Marisol. So Marisol, like in my notes, like I had like, the least amount of stuff to say about her because we didn't really get to see any of her family. We found out that she has an older brother. Well, I don't know if it's like if he's older, but like I know she has a brother and whatnot. So I would love to see, but like I have in my notes, I would love to see like an older brother, younger sister dynamic between the two, but we like, never saw him. Maybe it'll be cool if it was like a reverse, like, a reverse, like, Van Zant's, like, siblings. Maybe like Marisol taking the place of Danny, and like maybe her older brother taking the place of Liberty.
Yeah, like with Marisol and her because of course because Marisol's my favorite character. I have so many headcanons of her family. Like I do think that he was her older brother.
Of course, of
I
course.
do that, and the fact that he is introduced like the one second time we saw this kid, he was lending his football helmet for Casey to borrow, and I wish we should have because I have a like I could totally see that because the brother was on a football team, Casey, that he probably didn't trust his that when the carousel had their affair, that he probably if he knew he probably didn't like Casey.
Exactly. And I think like really like where was like, like regardless if there was an older brother or younger brother, I think like, what was kind of like, ridiculous is even more ridiculous about the fact that we never saw him considering the fact that like, well, yeah, he may be like years above in age, like years below in age, what have you. But like Marisol, like it was established that Marisol went to like, had been going to the Degrassi since her freshman year of high school, which means it's not too far fetched that her brother went to Degrassi too.
Yeah, and like we do see him in that scene when Casey and Jenna are having that annoying are talking where Jenna's like, "Hey, are you cheating on me and stuff?" like he's in the back. Marisol's in the background talking to her brother,
Oh, okay.
and yeah, like he's briefly in the scene in the background,
Okay. I actually
and
didn't know that. Hmm.
yeah, like yeah, so like that's why I think because he's the older of the two, and that we could have seen like Marisol had his protective older brother, that we missed out on that. But like what really interests me about Marisol, that I'm mad, very mad to this day that we don't that this was only in her season 11 character bio, that was actually never established on the show. That in her bio for season 11, that mentions that she puts on this perfect persona because she gets really good grades, she's smart, she's pretty, but she has a very bad home life with her family parents constantly arguing with each other. And I feel like what happened was when they thought about going through with Carousel, that they probably had this, that whoever came up with this bio was going to had this as background for why she decided to help Casey cheat on Jenny, because even though it's wrong, she felt like if I that she doesn't know what a healthy relationship looks like anyway.
Exactly. Like I
And
think
that's what drew her to Casey, because Casey, I mean, obviously Casey's parents' romantic background is obviously way worse than her parents, but she obviously feels that it's like it seems with that bio that it's that if she had her own point of view storyline, and that if she actually had agency and was an actual character in that plot rather than a plot device, we would see that she doesn't know what proper love is, because she doesn't see that home for her own parents.
exactly, exactly. Especially like, like maybe like her whole thing is that her parents are like, just like that her parents like, maybe they can be like going through like the it would have been interesting that instead of like, maybe Claire getting like that divorce storyline, it was like Marisol's parents who actually got it was Marisol and her parents who got that like divorce storyline.
I love Claire Bear, but that actually would have been a way better plot for Marisol. Because I mean, even when I first started writing Degrassi Fix with featuring Marisol, I had it that her parents were divorced. Like even before one of my mutuals dug up that Much Music bio, I had in my mind that I had it that her parents were divorced, and that she doesn't know what that she has a very warped view of love, and that she's very much a heavy romantic because she wants a romance that she doesn't see at home.
Exactly, exactly.
And and I headcanon that her father is very strict on her, because we see in Hollaback Girl that Marisol is very stressed and feels pressured, because one, she has to take on the presidential duties for Katie, because Katie's in rehab, obviously very stressful, yet your best friend is in rehab, almost overdosed on drugs, and you have to accept all her duties while being worried about your friend. That's one stressful thing. Then your dumb boyfriend takes pictures with strippers at a club to make you mad. That's another stressful thing, because she has Mo nagging on her head about going on her first date. And then because she's mentioned that she's not doing well at the moment in school and her math class, that her parents are about to snatch her car away. So that's another issue. Then the fact that she's working as a waitress and is power squad captain. Like she has all like it gives me the vibes that she has parents that are similar to Liberty and Danny and Jimmy's, where they're they're bougie black folks that want their kids to be
Of course, of
that
course.
while they're rich, they want their kids to that they're rich, and they want their kids to be perfect, and like and that they're harsh on them when they mess up. Because I mean, for me, like to me, Marisol's parents are definitely not even like I don't even think they're middle class, because how many middle class parents can just casually have their kids drive their own around their own convertible
Exactly.
and allow them to go on spring expensive spring break trips to Mexico.
Exactly. It's just like, I don't know, Marisol. I mean, good for her. Marisol's out here just doing everything, but like, still, I think really, so in your head, do you think Marisol's parents got divorced when she was younger or older? Like around like her, like around like the grassy, like high school age or like younger?
I think with what I had it before I saw the bio was that they were already divorced for like years.
Yeah,
But with that bio, it seemed to imply that they were pretty much on their way to actually find divorce because they were arguing and fighting all the time.
yeah, exactly. I think like, and this is coming from someone because my parents got divorced when I was very young. And and like it's interesting to kind of see like, that perspective of like, because obviously with like, like we said with Claire, like, her parents got divorced, when she was like in high school. With me, my parents got divorced, like, to get personal for a little bit, my parents got divorced when I was like only like 9 years old. So I rarely have any memory of them actually being together and whatnot. So I think like, it would have been interesting to see like Marisol have this like kind of like, like you said, where she doesn't know what healthy relationship looks like. And it's not just, and like, and it's also because like because like her parents, like, the model for like a relationship got divorced when she was like very young. So like she may not even remember what they were even like together. And I think that would have been like a very like, interesting thing for like, them to do.
Absolutely. Like Marisol, there's so much to say. Like if because I mean we don't because I know this also partially because the show didn't care about their black female characters, but like in season 12 we don't get a mention of Marisol's brother. So I just assumed that he graduated before she did with the class of 2011. Because we also could have seen because also we could have seen her parents react to Mo, like how with if her parents are serious and very strict and like have this like unhealthy relationship dynamic with each other, like how would they react to Mo, to a guy like Mo who is very immature, clownish, kind of like not really socially adept at times and but he's also this sweet guy that clearly loves their daughter very much. Like we it would have been interesting to see because we could have seen the kind of like how Liberty's parents hated JT. I could see her parents hating Mo at first.
Exactly. And this just came to mind. I think like, something that I would have been interested in seeing, because obviously something I would have been interested in seeing, I think like Marisol would have been a good character for this, is like seeing like, because like women in color, especially black women, like, like their daughters like very much get like, like at a very young age get slut shamed from like a very young age already. And so, like, and with Marisol having an older brother, I think that would have been interesting to kind of see like that kind of like, that like dynamic of like maybe her parents are just like very like unfair to her, but not, but like they don't have they don't hold that same treatment to like her older brother, kind of similar to the Bendari siblings, but like specifically geared towards like, like how like the black like community like deals with that.
Yeah, and like another thing, because like another this is how another hit where I feel like her parents were very harsh on her, where because when she fights with Katie, like she tells Katie how everyone sees Katie as perfect compared to her and how Katie has it all, where we could see Maris like to me like it's hints that Marisol's insecure because that is about that her parents possibly compare her to Katie all the time, saying, why can't you be more like Katie? Katie is very serious about her academics and you only care about cheer. Why can't you get into this extracurriculars like Katie? Like because Marisol, she was very involved. Like we see her practicing dodgeball, we see her in model UN, like this girl was like everywhere.
Exactly. And like you said, and like you've like, all like you've said before on like, Twitter and whatnot, is like, like Ali's like pill storyline would have gone even like perfectly like with her if it was like a multi-episode like storyline, especially if you get like her entire family involved. Like maybe this is the
Yeah,
first time she's getting her like, like her family is like kind of like respecting her. So she thinks that these pills are the answer.
Yeah, and it's a shame because my poor girl, like what we didn't see, like what we got to see, she felt it seemed like she did like she it was hinted that she didn't have the most like she was under a lot of pressure and she didn't know what love was until she had Mo. And makes me sad.
Exactly. Like,
Like I hate how like I mean a lot of season 11 character bios like if you dig through them a lot of them are very weird for like the newer characters but like because I mean Imogen's original season 11 bio was the fact that she was this chronicle liar that lied because she wanted because to hide her perfect to hide the fact that her life is actually boring. I mean that but with Marisol we get all these details that could have provided a like a even more interesting layer to the cheating storyline, but unfortunately we didn't. But
exactly.
again, that's what fan fiction's for.
Exactly. Again, Reed smells like teen spirits. It's amazing. I will tell you this every episode. It's incredible.
Thank you.
Of course.
And now I guess we're on to Shay. All right, so Shay is I have a lot of feelings because I do a lot because Shay's family when we see them give a very nu nuanced layer to the whole to racism in Western countries because a lot of critiques of the racism of Shay's the critiques of the racism plotline in next class. A lot of people are just shocked that are a lot of like people are like shocked that's the idea of Shay not understanding racism. And to me, it's not too shocking because, for one thing, classism is like a big thing in the Black community, and also the more money you have in the Black community, the more a lot of people who are wealthy distance themselves from Black people because they think that the kind of racism that affects poor Black people cannot affect them.
Exactly.
And like we see how very stuck up Shay's parents are just for the fact that she was scared that they wouldn't like Tiny.
Exactly. Exactly. Like I think Shay as a character means a lot to me because like she's probably the grassy character I probably like, saw myself like most in when it comes to like especially when it comes to like NC2 with Next Class season two, as messy as that was. One thing I did like about it is that, like you said, Shay wasn't really aware of like of like how racist like things are because that's something that to get personal for a minute. I grew up and like like when like growing up I was like I never really felt like things were bad. Obviously I never really felt things were bad. I like grew up in like a Black area. I went to a Black school. Even in high school when I had like more like when I like more like when I was like obviously became more aware of racism and like more aware of like all that stuff. I had like I was going to school with more than just Black people, and so even though it was still like predominantly Black, like I said, it's still predominantly Black. And so like it wasn't until I was about like 13 where like I realized that racism is still very prevalent out here. That is still very much like something you can experience, and I think that's made me like about what made me like what I really liked about Shay, especially her like family, because like her family definitely gives off the vibe of like, oh, we had to like we had to work hard so we can make sure you have a good life and whatnot. And like maybe seeing like how maybe Shay's family like really I really should have rewatched next class season two. Well, not I'm not rewatching that entire season. I'm not doing that to myself. But like but like specifically the Shay episodes, like her conversation with her parents and whatnot about the drawing and all that stuff, seeing like maybe how like they have earlier experiences to racism compared to like Shay herself being like very sheltered and all that stuff. Like because I as someone who grew up, I was like so like like growing up, I was like very like sheltered and all that stuff, and so I was kind of in Shay's situation where like I didn't really understand like about like I really didn't understand like a lot of like how like a lot of things are very anti-black, how like they still very much exist to this day.
Yeah, and like it was very I liked it because of what the what because of what conversations it brought about internalized black anti-blackness in a community. And like I like how because Shay's parents like woke up and realized that how how their how their how they were raising Shay was not really beneficial because of the fact that she couldn't recognize that her white friend was racist, that they educated her. And I and that makes it my like favorite look into a black family background. And but I'm just gonna talk about my own headcanons that I wish we had another black sibling pair, and in that case, I wish that Shay and Keisha were sisters.
Exactly.
Shout out to my because Shay, when she first came in for season 14, she had an entirely different personality, and that's because basically she was basically a Keisha clone at first. That they were like, "Hey, we got one black girl. We're gonna replace her with a black girl that's just like her." Like, and because like Shay was very close, they were both very close to like Marisol personality. Like Keisha, when the Britannia had her show, they obviously marketed her as the new. They obviously tried to push her as a new Marisol. And when they replaced her with Shay, is the same thing before Next Class rewrote Shay's entire personality.
Yeah.
And I wish that they didn't screw over the actress that played Keisha, because we could have had a very interesting sibling dynamic where we have a serious sibling and a smarter sibling, and twin sisters who are very diverse in plot lines to each other. And shout out to my friend Cece, because she had a whole plot line of how they would be as twin sisters.
Exactly, exactly. Shout out to CC, of course. And I think like I really actually like really like that dynamic of just Shay and like of Shay and Keisha being siblings, because we never really got like like the like 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 two. We never got like two sisters, like two like black sisters on like the grassy. I think that was a very huge like missed opportunity and whatnot. You could have easily just like had it so you could have either hell like look at the way they introduced like the Hollingsworth trio, where like where literally like Miles was like where like we knew Miles for several episodes before Frankie was introduced, and we knew Frankie for several episodes before Hunter was introduced. There was no reason why it couldn't be the same with Keisha and Shay. Where like yeah, we saw Keisha last season and we didn't see Shay last season, but like we can see her, we can still see her, and like it can still make sense that she went to Degrassi the whole time, because like that's happened to multiple different characters where we haven't seen them, but they've been there the entire time.
Yeah, like we could have had a very interesting black twin sister dynamic, because I'm like we had like we had multiple twins on the show that were white. Why couldn't we have a black twin dynamic?
Exactly, exactly.
And
Um,
like and as for like general like hair canons, like as I also if there was any two like black characters that I could make sisters, it would be Shay and Marisol. Not just because they're my favorites, we could have very interesting like rivalry between its two sisters, because there would obviously be, if we had Marisol and like Next Class Shay as sisters, they would have been very different from each other, what would cause a lot of conflict and strife. And it could have been really cute. Like yeah, Marisol would Shay, because of the fact that Marisol had graduated by the time Shay became a freshman. We could have still got an offhand mention that, hey, we could have had her cameo, or we could have introduced Keisha as Marisol's younger sister,
exactly,
or
exactly,
make them cousins.
exactly. And like Keisha was like in her only season. She was grade 9, right? Or grade 10.
Grade 9.
Grade 9. Okay, okay, okay. Yeah. So that definitely would have been like would have been interesting to kind of see that. Interesting to kind of see that, especially since like we don't we like trying to think about it, we didn't really have like a dynamic in Degrassi where like a sibling had already left like before the next sibling like came on. I don't think so. If like correct me if I'm wrong. But
Wait, can you
like
repeat that?
if like like where like a sibling like for example like a 4 year age difference where like a sibling left the show already, they already graduated, and then like their sibling, the next sibling like came on, not in the case of like someone like Maya or Katie where like they were still in school at the same time at one point.
Yeah, we didn't really get that,
Yeah.
unfortunately. It could have been really interesting.
Yeah, especially like kind of considering like maybe like like especially seeing if like Marisol was like a major character, seeing how like maybe like her legacy was left with like her sister and whatnot, and like with like a sister and whatnot, and maybe even like if you did like Keisha as her sister, considering the fact that like that she was like kind of like similar to Marisol, I would love to see like have I would love it to see like where like I would love it where you can see like yeah they're similar, but like can also see like the very small, like the small, but also like like not necessarily small, but also like the differences between them, despite the fact that they like overall have like a very similar personality. I would love to see something like that. I think like but like when it comes to Shay, like her family life in general, like it was very like reminiscent to mine, and like I think like her parents are actually very underrated. I think her parents are very underrated. I think her parents like are probably some of my favorite parents on the show and whatnot, from what I remember.
Yeah, like it's just sometimes like I because well, black people I can understand to exempt, but like I don't know, like not to like start like a diaspora war, but like it feels like in some culture, in some like countries, some black people in other countries, they I don't know, because like at least when I try to bring this up, like one of my black mutuals talked about how in Canada that they don't really place an emphasis on educating their children about racism. Like they don't really think is that they don't really think that anti-blackness in Canada is as strong enough to advise their children to be worried about it like us in the US. And like, but that's just one person. Like I've seen like plenty of other takes from Black Canadians, but like I don't know, some because I mean that's it's a slippery slope because it also because a lot of countries like Canadians they a lot of them do act like that there's no racism in their country. Same with European countries.
Which is very much
And
true.
yes, and like so it's not really unbelievable. Like it's just this like it's I'm surprised but not disappointed by Shay not understanding racism at first, but it's not this completely out of unrealistic thing like how I see a lot of fans try to paint the storyline as.
Exactly. Like I think like honestly, it's just a very like honestly, I think it's just a very like something that isn't very talked about. That's why I felt very seen when I saw the episode because seeing that like a character is like as old as Shay because Shay this was like season 2 of Next Class, so she was probably like 15, 16 years old. Um like a character as old as Shay, like not really like understanding racism. I think that was like kind of like a great idea because like there's still several things there was like because like growing up there was several things that I did not understand about racism that like other people who like maybe experienced it more than me, maybe like they like like other people my age who like went to like maybe more predominantly white schools who were in like more like white areas. Um have like experience and they just didn't understand. And they like, I mean, I didn't understand because like I didn't really, I was fortunate enough not to go through a lot of that. But also like, I think it would have been cool, like kind of like similar to how we said about similar to like earlier, where we said that it would have been interesting to see maybe like, Liberty, like, because like we said, like, earlier, it'll be interesting to see, like, maybe Liberty tell her parents about what the subject he's been saying to her before they got together. And they say, oh, that's not okay. We kind of see that with like Shay's parents and whatnot, where we see like, where we see like, them educate her about the whole, like, about the whole racism between like comparing black people to like animals and all that stuff. And like, maybe it would have been like, maybe like, it would have been cool to see maybe maybe Shay kind of like recollect like a lot of like, other like maybe memories from her past where something racist was said to her, but she just didn't realize it. Cause like I'm someone who like, who have like had like racist things said to me. And I just never realized it until years later. I'm like, oh wait, that was racist. Maybe like, because obviously she's been friends with Frankie for a long time. Like maybe like her parents could tell her, like, oh, like maybe like something Frankie said something like when she was like a little when she was like when they were like younger that or like maybe or one of the Hollingsworth said something that like when they were younger. Or like,
Or
like we said with like
considering Shay was very close to Lola, like,
exactly.
and Lola, yeah. And we all, I mean, a lot, much as a lot of people like to pretend otherwise, like Lola said a lot of pretty ignorant things,
Exactly,
and like,
exactly.
because it's weird how so many people expect, so many like non-black people have this idea that all black teenagers are like super educated and like hyper conscious about racism, and a lot of us don't even realize that until we're in our 20s
Exactly.
and we experience racism at university or in our jobs, and it kind of speaks of how like I don't like it feels weird, like that's why I suspect so many of them expect us to constantly educate them, because even as children we exist, we're not really have we can't afford, we don't have like a stress-free childhood from racism like they do. So they expect us to be hyper aware and they shame us when we're not. Shay's family background is very realistic.
Exactly. Exactly. Like you said, I was just about to bring up Lola, but like maybe like we could get because like we like Lola said that very nasty comment about Shay's like butts in NC1, and that maybe in NC2 we can get like her parents saying, yeah, that wasn't okay. Like I think that would have been like very great to see because what, like I said last episode, Degrassi does this thing, like a lot of like people like they don't realize like something like in a TV show or a movie they're like watching is like isn't okay, like or is actually like problematic because like the movie and TV show doesn't tell them that's problematic. They just like kind of don't think about it because a lot of people just watch Shay, like not Shay, Lola's like anti-blackness and thought like and since she was never held accountable for it, they said like, oh, she's like oh, like it's okay, she was never racist.
Yeah, it's like like Shay is the most developed black character in my opinion, with like one of the most elaborated upon like backgrounds, but we still like but we at the same time we should honestly, that's why I think we should have had another black sibling pair, because I feel like that would have helped bridge the gap, like if open up even more into her development, and that the other characters' development and their family development, you know.
Yeah, because it would have been great to see like Shay have a character, like have like a sister to kind of like really like talk to and really like kind of like to like talk to and really like kind of like especially considering that Shay didn't really like have any like like they're like obviously like they're like Degrassi's rule of just one black female character at a time. Shay didn't really have like any other black female characters to really like to kind of like share her experiences with. Like she just had like the only other black character she had was like her boyfriend Tiny. And I think like it would have been like good to her for to see her maybe like to see her like venture out. So, like maybe she gets an episode where she like ventures out to like ventures out to like find like some more like black friends and whatnot. Like maybe in like a fabled like in like a fabled next class season 5, she was able to like maybe like on the college tour she was able to like go visit HBCU and whatnot, um and like find more black friends there. And I think like she was really like why like her having like a sister, specifically Keisha, could have worked very well, just so we can really see her like kind of like we can really see her like really have like that sisterhood, just have somebody to like relate to, because like none of the black female characters really have like another black woman to like relate to. I think like Shay would have been a great choice considering the fact that there was just another black female character the previous season, even if you didn't want to make them sisters, maybe even friends or something like that.
Yeah, like I have it in my personal headcanon that if Shay and Keisha are twins, that Keisha's closer to Frankie and while Shay is closer to Lola. And that also affects how a lot of the attitude they view on things.
Exactly, exactly. So yeah,
And it is a crime that, well, we can honestly make a whole other video on black female friendships on how we would have wished there on how we wish how we could have what we personally would have wanted to see on Degrassi with in regards to platonic black female friendships.
exactly. Exactly. Like I think like, we can do a whole up we can do like a whole like we could done like a whole episode on that because it's just like something that's just like severely like missing on the show. Like the only times where like, there's two like, well, not this isn't the only times actually, but like, because technically Chantay and Liberty were on the show at the same time together, but they never interacted. Um, which like would have been like which is crazy considering the fact that like she's literally dating his brother. So like like we only got a little like Marisol and Chantay like interaction, so we definitely needed more.
Yeah, like I have no more thoughts to contribute, but
Okay.
my question for viewers is how would you have given more depth to the black female characters' individual family backgrounds? And what are your personal headcanons for them, for each of them?
Exactly, exactly. Like I said, like my headcanons, I have the headcanon that like that Dave's dad and Shantae's mom are like siblings. That's my headcanon that I like. And so like we discussed a bit of like our like headcanons about like the families of like these black female characters and whatnot.
T. T.
Hmm. Yep. All right. So do you have anything else to say about Shay or any character?
Nope.
Okay, yeah, I have nothing else. So of course, follow us at make sure to follow us on Twitter at Low Mistakes, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Low Mistakes on Twitter. And of course, like all of our other socials. I'm the JC Elliott on Twitter and whatnot.
And I am Marisol Eli on Twitter, on X, um, now, and Black Sansa Stark, Black Sansa Stark on AO3. So give my fic to read.
Of course, of course. All right, so we'll see you guys later.
See ya.
Yeah.